Hello, college football fans, and welcome to episode 193 of College Football Throwdown. I'm your co-host, Alex Schmitz, and today I'm joined, as always, by my dad, Peter Schmitz.
Hello, Husker fans and college football fans.
Yes, we're a father-son duo here to talk about college football by college football fans for college football fans. Today we don't have any game to talk about for our beloved team, the Nebraska Cornhuskers, but we do obviously have things going on in the national world of college football, including the semifinals of the playoff and the upcoming national championship games. So we'll be diving into all that here pretty soon.
Yes.
And as longtime listeners know, I live in LA, and so I have obviously been exposed to the fires going on here, but thankfully we've been safe from all that, and we extend our helpful thoughts and prayers to everyone out there who is affected by this terrible tragedy.
Yes, well, and it continues, right? I mean, the fires are still burning, and hopefully they'll eventually get them all under control. But the wind just keeps blowing out there, right, Alex? I mean, you were pretty much surrounded at one point in time, but they just never got close enough that they evacuated you.
Correct. Well, he says surrounded, they were still miles away, but it looked bad on the map, yes.
Yeah, you had some north, you had some east, you had some west, you had some south.
Yes, no, it's been a crazy week here, that's for sure. But we're going to go ahead and dive into the small bit of Nebraska news that we have this week, which includes some news on the transfer portal. We got 2 new additions coming into the program, which were nice to see. An Alabama offensive tackle named Elijah Pritchett and an Arizona defensive back named Marquise Groves Killebrew.
Yes.
I saw people were particularly excited about the tackle, of course, because we need more linemen.
Well, it's interesting, Alex. Yes, we definitely do, and he's a welcomed addition for sure. And I know we were going after one other player. It kind of looks like we're going to end up in second or third in that little, race, right? Because these transfer portal situations get pretty crazy. I mean, you got crazy money coming in from third parties, wealthy boosters and stuff, kind of step up to the plate and throw a bunch of money at. So some of these people are just getting paid crazy amounts of money right now, that way off of the standard market rates, right? So as a program, I think you got to kind of pick your spots, and I think we picked that we felt like we had our best chance with Pritchett, and we went after him, and I think we gave him a very attractive package, and he took it. But that means that maybe we don't have that to give to the next guy, right? So I kind of wonder, even though we're kind of in on a few other players, whether ultimately those players are all going to end up somewhere else because someone else is going to have a stronger commitment to throwing money at them.
Right. Well, I know there was a wide receiver from Houston that we were in contention for, but he's gone somewhere else.
Correct. He went to Texas A&M, and he had a very strong interest in Nebraska, and reasons including coaching history with Dana Holgorsen and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I would speculate, of course, it's speculation, since none of this stuff is transparent or visible, that because A&M wasn't even really heavily into discussion, and then all of a sudden they were. And I have a feeling that there's some dollars and cents involved in that situation.
Right. Well, we know they've got the money to throw around.
Yes.
Now, before I forget, we do have to stick with our tradition and crack open our cold beverages here. We usually do that right at the start of the podcast.
I was going to remind you if you didn't.
Oh, I'm sure you were. There was an old podcast where I got going, and then AJ chimed in, was like, "What about the beer?" So I got myself one of my last Japanese Sapporo beers here.
Okay. And I am not opening a can with you tonight, Alex, although I now have a nice full glass that I just poured from the tap. We happen to be at an annual event, an annual bash event for RV association that we're a part of. And they have a tap trailer. And so I'm drinking a local Lake Havasu, Arizona beer called Scorpion Amber, and it's wonderful. So
Okay.
here we go.
Cheers.
Cheers.
You drink your Scorpion Amber then.
I will.
And then one other little piece of news on the Nebraska player side of things was that one of our longtime linebackers, Javin Wright, announced that he'd be returning for his 7th year with the Huskers.
Crazy, right? Just crazy. 7th year. But now he is a guy who lost 2 years to injuries, 2 full years to injuries, right? And so that means he goes far enough back that he got the free COVID year, which is why this whole 7th year thing comes about. Now the fact that he's not ready to move on to the NFL, i.e., he knows that as of right now, he probably would not even get a free agent contract if he tried to go into the NFL. And 7th year, he might be close enough to getting his master's. It's like, I can stay in school for one more semester beyond this spring and play another season of college football and maybe finish a master's degree.
Right. Yeah, makes sense. And then in terms of our coaching situation, obviously, as we discussed last podcast, we fired our special teams coach, and we're still looking for that replacement. Obviously, Bill Bush's name has been thrown around a lot. I know you're a fan of him for sure. But, we don't know exactly who Rule has talked to. There's this coaching conference currently going on right now, coaching association. So we know that there's probably some discussions happening at that event as well. So we hope to learn that in the next week or two.
Correct. And just so podcast listeners will understand, I think Bill Bush would be an excellent choice, but I love the fact that Matt appears to be looking at all his options. He's likely to have discussions with a multitude of people, and I don't know that Bill Bush would even be on that list necessarily, other than the convenience that he already lives in Lincoln and would probably embrace the opportunity if it came his way. But at the same time, there may be a number of people and coaches and connections that Matt Rule has that would lead him to another path. So I don't necessarily expect that Bill would get that opportunity or get even an interview unless the set of circumstances allowed that to happen. Right.
Right. Was there any other Nebraska-related news you want to mention before we get to the national side of things?
Well, since we do cover the volleyball team on this podcast with some regularity, since I have a very passionate interest in our volleyball program as well, I love to brag on our team when we have the opportunity. And they just two big announcements that happened about a week ago. One of our incoming 2025 recruits, Campbell Flynn is her name. I'm trying to remember her first name. She is a setter, and she was named Gatorade National Player of the Year, which is a nice little recognition. It's actually a recognition that captures not only their athletic, but also their off the field, academics and community service and everything like that. So just another top notch young lady that's going to become a Husker here actually in a couple of weeks, right when next semester starts. And then the other big recognition was we had 3 of our players recognized as academic All-Americans. Lexi Rodriguez and Bergen Riley both received first team academic All-American, and Merritt Beeson got second team academic All-American.
Okay, there you go. All right, and then on the national side of things, obviously we'll be talking about the semifinal games here in a moment. But as you mentioned, the AFCA Coaches Association big conference is happening right now, and I saw some tweets about potential rule suggestions, I guess, that they would propose to the NCAA, including like stuff about the faking injuries, how to control that better, and changing the portal window to avoid, the having players leave during the playoff, period or the bowl game period, like we've saw a lot happen this year. So it'll be interesting to see what officially comes out of that convention once it's complete.
Right. And again, some of the ideas that are being tossed around there are ideas that then would have to go to a committee, be discussed at a committee level, and then brought to a vote of some kind of a NCAA organizational, vote to confirm them. So there's a whole process that those kinds of ideas have to go through. So often those are very preliminary concepts.
Right, right. And then one big piece of news, we talked about how Georgia, after they lost in the previous round of the playoffs, their second team quarterback, who had led them in the last couple games, was leaving their program to transfer somewhere else. Now it's been announced that their first team quarterback, who got injured, who played most of the year, Carson Beck, was going to the transfer portal. Turns out he's going to Miami. So now I don't know exactly what Georgia's QB room is like, but now they're going back to the third string guy. So you assume they must have a young talent back there who has promise but hasn't necessarily played much. Or are they going to be looking to get their own transfer quarterback in, you know?
Oh, I didn't know about so you're telling me the guy that played in the playoff game, this most recent playoff game, because the Carson Beck thing had already happened. That player also left
Well,
into
yeah,
the portal.
we talked about that last week, and Carson Beck was just injured. But then more recently, he announced that he was leaving and he's going to Miami, and everyone's saying that he probably got paid a handsome amount because he was a quarterback with, some decorated skills to him.
Absolutely. The guy's been a starter for like 3 years. That's but I wow. Okay. So yeah, I would agree with you. Even if you have a 5-star phenom coming into your program, or even already on the team but redshirting or something, you definitely need some depth at that position. So if they haven't already, they're going to be hunting hard after in the spring portal season after spring practice is over.
Yeah, definitely. And then, of course, we're getting into the coaching carousel time of the year, where coaches will be fired and then new job opportunities will open up. And that also includes the NFL world, where there have been quite a few coach openings, you would say, including like the Raiders and the Cowboys. So we've heard some names bandied about for consideration for those jobs, including Deion Sanders at Colorado and Steve Sarkisian from Texas. So we'll have to see, nothing official, of course. So we'll see what ends up happening there. But I certainly think Deion, probably his long-term goal would be to coach in the NFL. So I would not be surprised if he takes one of those opportunities.
Well, if he's given one, I'm not sure. That would be a huge, huge risk, in my opinion, for any NFL franchise, because number one, those head coaches get paid a lot of money, and they often get fairly long contracts, right? That when you hire a new coach, you're usually giving them a lot of authority, and that means a lot of staff changes. And so you're, as a owner, you're writing a pretty big check, and you're going to give that guy some runway usually. Okay. Or if you don't give it to him, ultimately, you're going to be paying him a ton of money, i.e., what happened to Matt Rule, right? Matt Rule was given like a 7-year contract when he first went to the Carolina Panthers. And then the owner got impatient with him just a little over 2 years into the thing. I mean, he got fired like the third game of his third year, right? So of a 7-year deal. And so then that guy owed Matt Rule all the rest of that contract, right?
Right.
I think some of these owners are need to wise up about that and make sure they're making the right choice. And I just feel like once they go a little deeper into Deion and realize the guy's been a major collegiate head coach for 2 years, right? Before that, he was at a historically black college where he did well, but nothing like NFL, right?
Right.
And and one of his years at Colorado was not successful. So it just seems crazy to me that he would actually get a job offer. I think he's having some discussions with there's some Raider talk, and of course now that the Dallas Cowboys job is open, that's very real because that's where he played a good portion of his his career, and he has a very close relationship with Jerry Jones, the owner there. But I just can't believe, as important as this hire is for Jerry Jones, that he would go that direction.
Right. And then one of the interesting stories that's come out of the results of the semifinal games, with of course Notre Dame and Ohio State making it to the national championship game, which we'll be talking about here momentarily. People got to talking about the money that is being paid out to those different teams. And one nice bonus for Notre Dame is because they're not in a conference, they get to keep all of that money they're being paid for themselves. So I was curious and wanted to look up like exactly what the structure is. So basically how it works out is it's $4 million to the team / conferences if you make the 12-team playoff, then $4 million if you make it to the 8-team round, then $6 million if you make it to the 4-team round, then another $6 million if you make it to the final two, the national championship game. So that's $20 million right there that
Right.
that Notre Dame gets to keep for themselves. Also, each team receives $3 million to cover expenses for each round.
Right.
And each conference receives $300,000 for each of its schools whose football team meets the NCAA's APR for participation in a postseason football game. So,
Mm-hmm.
also independent institutions. So Notre Dame's gotten some payouts there as well. But the point that was
Right.
being made was that Notre Dame's going to keep all 20 million of that, whereas Ohio State's, $20 million is being distributed amongst all of the Big Ten schools, right?
Right. But then also Indiana's and Penn State's, right?
Right.
So, and Oregon's. So, I mean, all of those schools brought money into the kitty, right, to help distribute to the Big Ten. So, on an ongoing basis, that's still going to end up being, $1 or $2 million to every institution of the 18 member schools, probably, right? After it's all said and done. And Notre Dame keeps all that money this year, but then in a year where they don't get it, they get nothing, right? So,
Right.
it's a feast and famine thing. But obviously, when you're getting to save that money among just yourself, as opposed to having to split it among 18, that's pretty big.
Yeah. Well, and also it's another, we've been talking a lot about the bye, and getting into the second round of the playoff from a competitive standpoint, and whether that makes sense and if it's actually even an advantage or not. But being paid an extra $4 million, so you're making a guaranteed $8 million, right? Because you're guaranteed to be in the second round of the playoff. That's not bad either.
No, exactly right. And just as a quick reference on this whole playoff note, I was just listening to a podcast done by Joel Klatt, the analyst and announcer who has a podcast, the Joel Klatt Show, and he's one of my favorites. And it's a podcast you definitely need to listen to, and I'd encourage our listeners to go and check it out. One of his most recent episodes, it was themed Joel Klatt, college football commissioner, and then he summarized his plan for how he would change college football, and it's quite good.
Interesting. What was his solution for the bye problem, the 12-team
Yeah,
structure?
well, that was one of the interesting things. He suggested that we move from 12 to 14, still keep the two buys, right? But only the top two teams would get a bye, not four teams. And then he would also extend the amount of games that are at home field sites, like not just the first round games, but he would do the second round games at home field sites too. And so that would be interesting to see even more, at home stadiums.
I'm a little confused though now, because then if you have two buys, but that means 12
Yeah,
teams are playing each other. So you have 6 games in that first round, and you get
right.
6 teams. So
And plus the two that the buys, and now you're at 8.
I see. I mean, that's different than because what we discussed was sticking with 12, but just changing how the buys work or expanding to
Right.
16. So this is now a third option, I guess.
Right. And that's why I found it quite interesting. And he also, called out some things that I love, right, Alex? He said everybody plays 9 conference games, right? If they're in a conference, you play 9 conference games. You play, two non-conference games against Power 4 competition, and then you can play, or excuse me, one non-conference game with a Power 4, and then 2 with a group of 5 type of schools, right? So it would just he would try to balance out the strength of schedule a
Right.
little bit more.
I think I did see that part exerted because I saw that online. Though the
Okay.
point that was raised was that that will really hurt FCS schools, right? Because
Oh,
FCS
huge.
schools benefit from the paydays they get for playing those big schools.
Absolutely correct. I mean, that can be a huge portion of somebody's budget, right? So yeah, that would be a big change. Yeah, and it is never going to happen.
Right. But yeah, of course, seeing those headlines about Notre Dame making $20 million off of this is of course increasing calls for Notre Dame to join a conference and have to play 9 conference games like other people and make it more fair and all that sort of stuff. But from Notre Dame's perspective, they're like, hey, we're reaping the rewards right now of our independence, and sure we'll never get the bye, because we can't be a conference champion. But what they're seeing from this year, which is admittedly a limited data set, is that that's necessarily an advantage. So they're okay to, get their warm up game, be ranked the 5th best team, right? So they still get a pretty good matchup in that first round and just try to make a run like they did this year.
Yep, I agree. I like you say, I think it has strengthened their commitment to remaining independent, which is counter to what I would like to see happen. But it is what it is.
Right. All right. So now I think it's time to actually dive into those games. And we can go ahead and kick things off with the Penn State Notre Dame game, which was the first one that we watched together. Well, I should say we were watching it separately, but we were texting back and forth, as
Yeah.
the game went on. And kind of the
Right.
story of that one was how dominant Penn State was in the first half, and yet they were only up 10-3 by halftime, including a drive where they got all the way down to the 3-yard line of Notre Dame and had to settle for a field goal.
Correct. Yep. And it was transpiring. I was, just getting so anxious and angry, frankly, at Penn State, because I knew that their lack of closing the deal and getting points on some of those dominant drives that they had was going to come back to haunt them. And sure enough, it did.
Right. And then, of course, Notre Dame, fights back more in the second half, but Penn State also bounces back, so it's a tie game, 24-24, late in the game. And Notre Dame actually threw 2 interceptions in the game at various points that helped Penn State out, obviously. But Penn State had the most crucial one where they had the ball with only about 33 seconds left. They're trying to, drive it to maybe get a field goal, avoid an overtime. And they throw a devastating interception at their own 42-yard line. So Notre Dame's able to get in position, get a first down to get in a good spot for a 41-yard field goal that wins them the game right at the end.
Right. Well, and the thing is that Notre Dame, I mean, in the first half, Penn State, dictated the pace of play, and they were showing their physical dominance at the line of scrimmage. It looked like there was a point in time early in the game where it looked like Penn State was going to run away and hide, basically, and really dominate the game. But then Notre Dame made some adjustments, some very good adjustments, kind of was able to change up their scheme, and all of a sudden the running lanes weren't there anymore for Penn State, who has 2 incredible running backs and a very good offensive line. But all of a sudden their running game started to struggle a little bit more, even though they did continue to have some success in the second half, Penn State offensively. But then Notre Dame's offense came alive in that second half, also making some adjustments. So just a ton of credit to Notre Dame for their coaching staff's ability to make adjustments at halftime and come out and look like a very different team in that second half.
Yes. And on the previous podcast, we gave our predictions for that game. I predicted that Notre Dame would win 35-31. Well, you predicted that Penn State would win 27-17. And so I ended up winning that one, obviously, with Notre Dame winning 27-24. A little lower scoring than I was expecting, but it was about that same point spread, 3 to 4 points. So that was a big win, obviously, for Notre Dame, who's kind of been on the underdog, in a lot of the games they've played so far this playoff, and yet they've somehow, luck of the Irish, they've made it all the way to the championship.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. And again, they're coming in as a massive underdog in this next game, so they're playing that underdog role quite nicely.
That's right. Well, one thing I found interesting was I looked up the stats for both the Notre Dame Penn State game and then the next game, the Ohio State Texas game, and both were quite even, in terms of like total yardage and time of possession and turnovers and things like that. Nobody was crazily lopsided, really, one way or the other, which was nice to see, right? There were two good competitive games from an entertainment perspective. I think they both delivered for sure. Although I know for you, the next one, Ohio State versus Texas, was very stressful because you were convinced that Texas was going to be making a comeback and get back in the game and start dominating at any moment.
Right. Much like the Notre Dame game. I watched an Ohio State team, which again started the game, in my opinion, controlling the game, controlling the line of scrimmages, both offense and defense, really playing well, and just looked flawless in their first drive. But then, unlike the next three drives, they self-destructed. They had very poor and untimely penalties, including a personal foul penalty by a player that should never have done that, where he just hauled off and punched a guy in the face mask, right in front of the ref. So it was just so blatantly obvious, and it was in a critical situation where they would have been able to convert what I would say was an unscheduled third down, and instead, they ended up needing 20 some yards or whatever, and didn't get the conversion and blew up what was an attractive drive.
Right.
So they just let Texas hang around, and you just can't do that with a good team, and because so often that comes back to bite you.
Right. Well, it was interesting to look at the play-by-play for the game because you're right. Ohio State had a very nice drive to score early, and then in that first half, there was a series of 8 punts in a row by both teams. So it was just going back and forth, a kind of a defensive battle where neither side could really get anything going. And then Texas finally, near the end of the second quarter, puts together a nice drive, scores that touchdown, ties the game 7-7. And there's only a few seconds left in the half, 13 seconds actually. And Ohio State gets the ball back, does a little short pass play that completely blows up, and the guy runs for 75 yards for a touchdown, right? And so they go into the halftime still up by 7, this time 14-7.
Right. That was a huge, huge play for Ohio State. But again, not the kind of play that you can hang your hat on and say, we got control of this game now, right? That was just one play, so they weren't controlling the tempo. They weren't controlling the line of scrimmage necessarily, although I think they were better. But because of the illegal procedures and, stupid penalties, they just kept self-destructing. And, if you do that, you're not scoring points.
Yeah. Well, this is an interesting game where, like I said, the stats were generally pretty close, and it really was a game that came down to just 2 plays, one of which being that 75-yard touchdown I mentioned, and then the last, of course, being near the end of the game when there was just 4 minutes left. Texas ended up having 5 opportunities. Basically, I think it started at the 2-yard line. It was first and goal from the 2. Then they didn't get it, but Ohio State had a penalty, so they got to do another first down play. So they had 5 plays from that distance, and couldn't get any points. And in fact, on the fourth down, their final chance, threw an interception to Jack Sawyer on Ohio State's team, who returned it back for a touchdown to put them up to 28-14 and basically seal the game away. But in another world where Texas scores there, it's 21-21, with 4 minutes left, and it's a dogfight still. But that one play totally changed everything.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it wasn't an interception. It actually was a sack fumble.
That's right.
Right. The irony, of course, is that the two players involved were roommates together at Ohio State.
Right.
Because you started his career at Ohio State.
Oh, okay. I kept hearing people saying, yeah, they were roommates, and I was a little confused about what they were talking about, but that makes more sense. So, yes, the final score, of course, ended up being Ohio State 28, Texas 14. Of the previous podcast, we both predicted that Ohio State would win. I said it'd be 31-24, and you predicted it'd be higher scoring, 42-31. Ohio State's final margin of victory, 14 points, was around what we were thinking, but it was much lower scoring game than we expected. And frankly, in terms of the actual play on the field, Ohio State wasn't that much better than Texas, right? They just got two huge plays, right?
Correct. Well, and I would argue that if you break into the actual play snap by snap, I would say there was plenty of plays that indicated Ohio State had an advantage, but they just kept making mistakes that stopped favorable drives, right? And Texas was gaining momentum. Then as the game went on, I felt like Texas's line of scrimmage was starting to get better, right? And their running backs were starting to have success and things like that. So I felt like the longer the game went on, the more likely it was going to be that Texas would win.
Right. Not to mention, of course, that it was at the Jerry Dome. They're in Arlington, Texas, so it was basically a home game, and the crowd was certainly on Texas's side. But it felt like every time the momentum really went Texas's way, especially like there at the end of the first half, Ohio State found a way to get a big play and kind of quiet the crowd.
Yes, exactly. That was huge, right? I mean, because they didn't let that additional momentum to carry forward for Texas.
Right.
And it's another one of those irritating things about Texas.
It's also been pointed out that goal line stand by Ohio State wasn't a fluke this season. I want to say like 7 times this season they have had a goal line stands like that where they kept the teams from getting any points, including against Nebraska, as a matter of fact.
Correct. That is right.
Yes. So yeah, we got 2 good semifinal games, and it went the way I was hoping it would, with Notre Dame winning the one match, and then Ohio State, of course, beating Texas, our hated rival. I know your friend Brian wasn't happy about your rooting choice there, but hey, we stick by it here.
Exactly.
And I actually went back and counted up the results from all of our predictions throughout the whole playoff, as well as the bowl games that we predicted. So I was right on both these semifinal games, while you were only right on one. So that now puts us at 8-9. You're still in the lead by 1 for overall correct predictions here.
I'm surprised I'm in the lead at all. So that's amazing.
Oh yeah, you should be proud of that.
Yes.
Now, as you mentioned, Ohio State is the favorite going into this national championship game. From what I saw, the latest is they were 8.5 favorites in Vegas. This particular game is being played in Atlanta, Georgia, so not necessarily a big home field advantage for either side there. One thing I will definitely be looking out for is just injuries on both teams, because both teams lost several important players in their semifinal games and are definitely not, at 100%. But, they've kind of weathered the storm. They've made it all this way through the playoffs. It's number 7 versus number 8, I think, in terms of the initial seeding, which is kind of fun, right? So it's an exciting matchup.
It is an exciting matchup. And the 7 versus 8 thing, I'm surprised that is not being talked about more. Of recognition that in previous years, neither of those teams would have been even remotely close. They wouldn't even been in the conversation about the college football playoff that existed before this year, right? And at 7 and 8, occasionally there were years where fourth, maybe even the fifth, maybe even the sixth ranked team would have some argument for being included in the Final Four, but I don't remember a year where that went to seventh or eighth team, right? And yet here we are with two teams that ended up, being in this playoff and ranked in that 7-8 range, and they're the two that are playing for the national championship.
Right. And obviously that is a little bit skewed because of, the fact that Arizona State and Boise State, right, qualified at 3 and 4, even though in terms of their overall ranking, they were below both Ohio State and Notre Dame. But regardless, the fact that they both made this run, after being on the outside and having to go the full distance, right, all 4 games to make it to this point is impressive.
It really is. And like you say, though, the accumulation of injuries, the accumulation of just physical wear on those players, it takes a toll, and it'll affect the outcome of this game and might even affect some of these teams next year, right? Because they're going to that's a lot of games, right? 16 or even 17 games, right? No, both of those were 16 games because neither of those played in a conference championship game. But I mean, that's a lot of football for a college football team.
Yeah.
So that'll be interesting. I feel like Notre Dame has gone into this whole thing with more people standing on the sidelines due to injuries, right? And so the accumulation is maybe even more acute for them because I truly believe Ohio State was the deeper roster, if you will.
Right. Well, and I'll say one beneficiary from this past weekend is definitely Indiana. After, all the crap they got from ESPN talking heads, after their defeat in the first round about how bad they were and how they didn't play anybody. But who are their 2 losses on the whole year? Ohio State and Notre Dame.
Yep.
I know. That's pretty funny.
I know. That's crazy.
And then it's also been announced that the ref crew for this championship game is going to be from the SEC. Interestingly, they were actually the refs who did the Penn State versus Boise State game earlier on in this playoff. And I saw someone pointing out that there was kind of a high number of penalties in that game, like higher than both teams' averages, which would lead you to think that they may be maybe more sticklers for the rules, more ticky-tack than maybe your average ref crew. And Ohio State had 9 penalties already in their game against Texas. So I'll be curious to see if that carries over into this championship.
Well, if I'm Ohio State staff, man, I am preaching to the choir on that crap, right? Because again, I feel like that is what allowed Texas to figure itself out and compete in this last game. If Ohio State puts their foot on the gas and remains crisp and plays clean football from the beginning of that football game all the way through the first half, then I think they may very well have scored another touchdown or 2, and that thing would have never been close. Right. But because they kept so if they do that rinky-dink, error stuff, mental error stuff, illegal procedures, offsides, and then of course the horrible personal foul things, they're going to regret it. I would say that's the storyline when Notre Dame wins.
Okay, we'll have to see. And one other just little fun side note is this particular quote from Brian Kelly back in April of 2022. He said, quote, "I want to be in an environment where I have the resources to win a national championship." Of course, after he left Notre Dame for LSU. And now here we are 2 years later, and his former team has made it into the national championship. Meanwhile, LSU is way on the outside looking in. So not a great look for Brian there.
I love it. Not a fan of Brian Kelly, that's for sure.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I haven't followed Marcus Freeman's story too much, but it's cool to see him having success. He's a pretty young coach, and he's clearly got his team really believing. That you can tell they've got that heart to them. And he's also, a coach of like African American and Asian descent. So there's some, cool aspects to him making it this far in that area as well. So I'm definitely rooting for the Fighting Irish personally going into this weekend.
Right. Well, I do get that sentiment, and I really have grown just watching his team through this playoff has made me more of a fan of his, and watching the interviews and stuff, and how he is handled himself, and how his team his players have handled themselves in front of the media. Just very impressive overall.
I was just reminded as well, I'm sure you saw the replay of this particular play from the Notre Dame Penn State game, where the Notre Dame player is like, being hit by like 2 or 3 different Penn State guys and puts in the extra effort and reaches the ball out to get the touchdown. There was some great running by both teams in that game, fighting for every inch. That was great to watch.
It was. And And it's the kind of high level football that you hope you're going to see in a playoff like this. And I mean, for all the criticisms that the playoff has received this year, my biggest criticisms are left to criticize the people who are doing the analysis. My criticisms are particularly the ESPN crew and how they overreacted to the Indiana loss, for example, and that sort of stuff. And I'm not hearing a bunch of apology or a bunch of acknowledgement that, maybe we overreacted. I would love for, Paul Feinbaum and all these other SEC apologists from the evil network, the 4-letter word, to literally apologize to the University of Indiana and its football team to say, what, we overstepped our bounds. We jumped the gun with this analysis. And what, I want to publicly state that, now in hindsight, I have to acknowledge that, Indiana is probably a lot better football team than I was giving them credit for. Something along those lines. But you're not going to hear that.
Right. Well, and I also saw it being pointed out, we just had the first round of the NFL playoffs this past week. And what did we see? The home teams, the higher rated teams, generally won in pretty dominant fashion. They weren't necessarily super entertaining games, so that can happen, in the first round of a larger playoff.
Exactly. But then there's the exception, like Washington beating Tampa Bay, right? Which was the exception to that rule, or I mean, more the underdog winning or whatever. But and even the Pittsburgh game, I don't remember who was at home, but that one is another one. So there is both sides of it, right? Like, you just can't immediately jump to the conclusion that because they lost this particular game, they didn't deserve to be there. You just can't do that.
Right. Totally. All right. So now it's time to get to our predictions here.
Okay.
And I'm going to have you go first this time. On the one hand, we have the Ohio State team that, like you say, is probably a little less beat up, has the edge in terms of the numbers on the stat side of things. And on the other hand, you've got a Notre Dame team that has that grit and has, kind of made this not Cinderella run, that's overstating it, but, a run where they were the underdog a lot of the way through, and have managed to, they squeaked by, right, Penn State, by 3 points with a field goal at the end, so they've made it here and are the underdogs for sure. So what's your thinking on the score?
Well, so, like I said, I've really enjoyed watching Notre Dame. Gritty is a good word to describe them, and I know they're going to give just tremendous effort, and they're quite disciplined. So if it becomes a game of high sensitivity officials, where ticky tack stuff does get called, that could definitely swing things. However, I think Ohio State, when I just look at it on paper, when I look at the stats over the course of an entire year, and particularly over the recent games, I look at Ohio State and I say they are better. They're better at the lines of scrimmage. They're better in terms of the skill talent that they have. I don't think either quarterback is spectacular. So it's not necessarily a game where, one or the other quarterback is going to have some major advantage based on their work, their body of work. So I'm going to go with Ohio State as the victor. And, sometimes national championship games can kind of get away from you because once it becomes apparent that one team's going to win, the other one kind of loses its focus. We've seen that a few times, and the
Right.
other one just kind of he starts living off the high of the adrenaline, and so I think there's some degree of concern about that, and that could go either way. But in my case, I'm going to say it's going to go Ohio State's way, and I think Ohio State's going to win the game 38-17.
Wow. Dominant.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go differently, partially because I genuinely believe in Notre Dame, and I didn't root for them in the second round of the playoff and came to regret it because obviously they won that one. And I did root for them against Penn State, so I'm going to stick with my horse there. Also, if I'm right and you're wrong, that'll tie us up 9-9 overall on our predictions, so I'm hoping for that.
There you go.
But my prediction is that, like you say, that Ohio State maybe does make some mental mistakes and isn't able to get out to an early lead. I think if Ohio State does, kind of get out to like a 14-point lead real quick, that could be pretty rough for Notre Dame because I'm not sure their running focused style offense is the best at making that comeback. But I think they are obviously good at maintaining a lead if they're able to get it. So I'm going to say that it'll be a lower scoring, a more defensive game. Then Notre Dame will win it by 3 points, kind of similar to the game against Penn State. So let's say that Notre Dame wins the game overall with a score of 30-27 over Ohio State.
All right. I like it. We went opposite ways. And, I mean, it very, I could see this going in so many different ways because I don't have complete confidence in Ohio State's ability to be disciplined.
Right.
I mean, we should have beaten them. How does a team that we should have beaten win the national championship? Right? Like that's the thing I can't completely get my head around.
Right. Well, it just goes to show, right, that I guess what people have been saying about Ohio State all season is true, that they're immensely talented.
Yep.
But it's just that, yeah, as an overall team, whether that's, Ryan Day's coaching or just, the players getting complacent at times or whatever, but they just haven't been able to maintain that killer focus, through 60 minutes of a game. So they played it close against us. They obviously lost pretty badly to Michigan. And yet, they clearly turned on a different spark. They got more focused after that tough loss to Michigan and have, kind of turned it up in the playoff, right? And it's kind of like you've talked about in the past with the volleyball tournament. Sometimes a team doesn't have the best regular season, but as long as they're playing their best at the end when it really matters, that'll get you to the championship, right?
Right. Exactly.
All right. Well, we're looking forward to watching the game this upcoming Monday. And it'll be hopefully it'll be another good competitive game and a good capstone. If we have a good competitive national championship, I think overall people will look back on this first experiment with the 12-team playoff as an overall success. We would have had more good games than blowout games. And obviously, all the excitement from the first round being at home stadiums with the possibility of, reforming the seating system in some way to make that more fair. I think overall the reaction to it will be more positive than negative, despite whatever spin ESPN is hoping to put on it.
Right. Well, and I really do. I think that at the end of the day now, having had all but one game played out, I think you look at this and say this is everything we had hoped it would be, and that the only thing that they might seriously think about is tweaking those four bye weeks, and seeing who gets those. Right, it'll just be the top four teams. I could see them making that one tweak and no longer giving that automatically to the conference champions.
Right. I would agree with that. All right. So if you out there enjoyed listening to this podcast, you can email us at huskerpete13@gmail.com. You can also search for us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts under College Football Throwdown. You can leave us a ring or review there. We always love hearing feedback from the fans. So thank you all out there for listening, and thank you, Dad, for joining me for this episode. And until next time, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.